Remember this day, men, for it will be yours for all time.
There is no question that the Battle of Thermopylae was a massive event in world history.
What Frank has done is he's taken an actual event and turned it into mythology.
I've never been accused of realism, and I never deserved to be.
Every single element, the sky, the way the sunlight comes in, the dust, the way that characters talk and move, all is a stylized version of reality.
No, we're taking history and making it into a legend. It's magical. The colors and the style of Frank Miller and now Zack Snyder are extended reality.
We were creating our own reality. We call it illustrated reality. Every image in this film has taken a level of R&D and research and look development that's, I think, like no other picture.
It's sort of the operatic treatment. We're not really married to historical truth, and we're not really married to realistic filmmaking conventions. We can take lots of liberties, both theatrically, dramatically, and stylistically.
All my life, I wanted to tell this story. So I read a great deal about it, and I went to Greece and sailed on the Aegean and felt those waves. And I went to all the different battlefields, including the hot gates, and I was finally ready.
We're not so concerned about exactly how it was in 480 BC. This is through the mind of Delios.
And so the boy, given up for dead, returns to his people, to sacred Sparta, a king, our king, Leonidas!
Delios is known as the storyteller. In Frank Miller's comic book, he spends a lot of the time entertaining the troops when there's downtime.
Now, as then, a beast approaches.
Through the storyteller, you get this fantasy element, and it allows it to be fantastical.
He knows how to exaggerate a moment for dramatic purposes. And because you have these young Spartans listening, you basically have the excuse of, it's their version of the Battle of Thermopylae that you're seeing. And I think that that's why you have giant elephants, that's why you have giant Xerxes, that's why you have all the impossible bits.
What it allows in the story is that it allows for this kind of mythical, magical surrealism to happen.
I came up with the story of the wolf as an allegory for the hot gates themselves. There's no historical evidence that he ever fought a wolf, but I wanted to symbolize not only the structure of battle hot gates, the way he traps the wolf in between walls of rock, but also to establish Leonidas as a legendary hero.
It's been more than 30 years since the wolf in the winter cold.
This is the wolf that was inspired very much by Frank's wolf.
It's larger than life, and I thought, how can we create something that had dynamic movement, tension, and you could feel was alive?
We shot with the mechanical wolf, then we ended up replacing him with the CG wolf.
No fear that grips him is full.
Leonidas, his name means born of lion stock. So already when he was given his name at birth, he was expected to be a great hero.
Leonidas was one of two Spartan kings. They always had two. One was the civilian king, the other the military. Leonidas was the military one who somehow, through a gigantic leap of imagination, understood exactly what Persia was up to.
You threaten my people with slavery and death. Oh, I've chosen my words carefully, Persian. Perhaps you should have done the same. This is blasphemy. This is madness. This is Sparta!
I kind of cheated on that because that actually happened 10 years earlier with a different king. But I wanted to show that they broke rules constantly. It was blast, kill, messenger. And to kill 30 of them was beyond blasphemy. But those were the Spartans.
Welcome, Leonidas. We have been expecting you.
The Spartans had a tripartite government. It was really quite advanced. I mean, they had executive officers called ephors.
The ephors were incredibly important to the Spartans, and the fact that in the comic book you've got these ephors, these kind of gnarled old guys who hold the future of the city-states in their twisted hands. It's a very good evocation of them.
Before your plan is heard, warfare.
The ephors represented moral decay, and they represented selling out and being corrupt, and therefore, you know, the makeups kind of represented that as far as they were falling apart and oozing and disturbing.
You have some ephors who represent a pre-logical or pre-reasoned past.
The Spartan army would only move when a certain spirit called the Oracle told them they should go and fight. The Oracle was a real person, and she'd sit over this fire, sniffing up this hallucinogenic smoke, and then she'd babble out stuff. And this is what the Spartans believed were messages from the spirit world.
We shot in a tank underwater, so her outfit could move as it does.
It's a zero-G effect that we've recreated into the giant tank for the girl to perform the dance she had to do.
What happens in reality is that the Oracle tells the Spartans that they can only go and fight at Thermopylae if their king is prepared to die.
Honor the Carnea!
So when Leonidas sets out from Sparta, he knows he's going to certain death.
I suppose I'll head north.
The hot gates.
Move out!
Gorgo's a great character. I mean, she's a great character not just in the film, but in history. And we know quite a lot about her because Herodotus was so right about her, which tells us that she was significant.
Come back. More on it.
Yes, my lady.
You know, Gorgo's not really in the book. She's, you know, I think she has like 2 squares of a page in the graphic novel.
We looked at Frank Miller's book. That there was a component that wasn't fully elaborated, and that was the female side of the story.
The thing that we missed was a reminder of Sparta, or why we fight of it. And that became what Gorgo represents in the movie. She's back there. She has this job of rallying the troops, the Spartan army, to go and support Leonidas.
We don't know to what degree a Spartan woman could prance into the assembly hall and announce to male voters who were, remember, the only citizens were male, that she was going to do this and this and that. But the idea of emancipated, strong women taking a part in politics is very Greek.
I thought of, the legacy and how she was to define her era. And she was a woman who was at the forefront of Spartan society.
Unusually in the ancient world, Spartan women were not repressed. And so when you think of Gorgo, you have to think of a young woman who knew that she had political standing. And so I'm sure that she's a woman who gave Leonidas a real run for his money.
I beg you, bold king, to permit me to redeem my father's name by serving you in combat.
In the story that Herodotus tells us, Ephialtes was some type of local Thessalian in that area.
We know that he was somebody who went over to the Persians. But he quickly became demonized by history, so it's no surprise in a way that he ends up in the film as this kind of embittered hunchback.
That's something that they've tried to draw out of Herodotus. In Herodotus, we really don't get that degree of information.
I turned him into a hunchback because I wanted to stress just how rough the Spartans were.
But as for the fight itself, I cannot use you.
In the movie, we see who put such a high premium on physical prowess and beauty would have no place in their society for a man like Ephialtes.
Andrew played Ephialtes, and he's basically in this insane makeup. Yeah, the Hunchback was a very difficult makeup because we had 3 elements that we had to adapt to try to come up with the final character. The size of the actor, elements from the maquette, and elements from the comic book.
Mother! Father! You were wrong!
Ephialtes was a traitor and was given financial rewards by the Persians.
Embrace me as your king and as your god.
Yes!
Xerxes was the emperor, the ruler of the Persian Empire. He referred to anybody else as a slave.
I require only that you kneel.
Xerxes regarded himself as God. He was revered as a god king, and he believed it was his destiny to conquer the world.
He's like a spoiled kid, he's rich, he's arrogant, but underneath, ultimately weak and very insecure. So I think he has a bit of an ego problem. That's what I think.
Come, Leonidas. Let us reason together. It would be a regrettable waste. Imagine what horrible fate awaits my enemies when I would gladly kill any of my own men for victory. And I would die for any one of mine.
Frank's book shows that Xerxes is almost a head and a half taller. I was like, look, I want Xerxes to be way taller, like crazy scale.
Some of the work we did just in camera. Leonidas was shot with 1 camera, actually. And Xerxes was shot with another camera. The camera that shot Xerxes was using the same perspective that it would have if it shot him normally. It was just a little bit closer.
It's fantastic, it's surreal, but at the same time it's real.
That was part of the aesthetic, of the storyteller, sort of linking in with the impossible image that you see. Because everyone's around the campfire and they're a little bit like, and? Okay, he's king of the Persian army, so what? Yeah, but he's all in gold, and he's bald, and he's 9 feet tall. Now, okay, all right, good. What else? It's like, now this story sounds a little more interesting.
Yours is a fascinating tribe. Even now you are defiant.
If you're a Spartan citizen, you are a soldier, you are a warrior. You're not allowed to be anything else.
These are people who, from the age 7, trained for nothing other than war.
All young boys were taken away from their mothers and put into a thing called the agoge.
They were absolutely dedicated to warfare, but at the same time they had an absolute code of honor on what it meant to be Spartan. And it was cruel, it was very cruel.
When they were training these young soldiers, they would go over the mountains to another city-state to murder someone from another city as part of their training.
In that process of training, all this myth-making surrounded the nature of the ordeal. And again, the idea was that this was going to be a hyper-militaristic male initiation.
In a way, Frank has put sort of the classical aesthetic back on the story. He wanted to get at the essence of what a Spartan is, not at the reality of what a Spartan is. And I think that that's the refreshing thing about it.
They picked up on the stylization I brought to the drawing of it. So these Spartans are much more physical in their appearance than the real Spartans were.
The army was equipped in a particular way, all with bronze breastplates.
If you dressed them up the way with the entire panoply that Spartans actually had, where they were carrying around half their body weight in armor, they would look like beetles. Instead, we have these strapping young men, you know, bare-chested and moving with lightning. And so it captures much more the spirit of what I was after, and what clearly Zach's after.
If you look at the movie, their wardrobe is their bodies. When I would talk to the actors about, you know, the costumes, I'm like, the costume is you. You're the costume.
So we had to basically create men that you would believe would be these warriors. They physically had to look beyond what you had ever seen anybody look like.
Zach said that he wanted to hire a cast of fit men and turn them into outrageously fit men. We hired a guy named Mark Twight, and he came in and with a very, I will say, Spartan regimen, turned these guys into fighting machines.
They basically never did the same workout twice. So we're combining gymnastic, metabolic, and lifting or throwing. That starts to cause a belief in oneself that doesn't come from, you know, doing curls sitting on a bench.
It's something where they suffer, and it's their agoge.
You know, really what we wanted to do with the actors was make them a gang.
There's a bond that's created by that, that's suffering. And I think that was also part of the thing that made them into a single, you know, impenetrable unit. Sharing pain is such a very, very Spartan concept, I think. You care about the guy next to you, with him. That was just behind their eyes and real.
Delios was this great storyteller, and he told around the campfires these things to bond the men together.
Walking! And are on the dead! Who will Xerxes dare to send next? There's nothing that can stop us now!
Even the king allows himself to hope. Against Asia's endless hordes, against all odds, we can do it. We can hold the hot gates.
Essentially what the story boils down to is a piece of strategic genius, using the land and the sea of Greece to defeat a vastly superior opponent.
Thermopylae in Greek means the hot gates, or the warm gates, actually, and it's a pass in northern Greece. And what's unusual about it is it's a very narrow bottleneck. What that meant is throughout antiquity, a small number of soldiers could block that pass.
By picking a narrow divide, the numbers essentially didn't count. All that mattered was skill, and Spartans could outfight the Persians and handle.
No mercy!
The biggest challenge in making the Book of 300 was understanding and translating phalanx combat in a way that was graphically understandable. Two forces in rectangular, shield and spear, each man covering a third of the one next to him. And just picture a train wreck, because that's what the battle was like.
Steady!
The way we did that shot where they impact is we did like a football sled, and when the stuntmen hit the sled, they actually pushed the whole sled backward, and the camera was on it with the guys, so it all went back as a single unit.
The Spartans fought as a unit. That's why when I wrote the book, I gave them a collective voice.
And action!
When we're shooting these things, we have 30 or 40 guys on set at once, all having battles. They have an incredible job, and they've done a really amazing job at coordinating all that stuff.
A lot of the action you see in the film where they'll do a certain maneuver and one person covers the other's back. There's many fight choreography, much is unsaid. It just has almost a telepathic vibe to it, and that's from the constant training and rehearsal.
Yeah, the Spartans weren't into individual heroics. You know, if anybody broke from the line and kind of rampaged through the enemy forces, killing left, right, and centre, they would be taken home and executed. This was not how Spartans behaved.
The problem with phalanx warfare is, how do you show individual courage? Now, the Greeks solved it one way. and that was on base paintings, they showed individual warriors stabbing and slicing. In the 300, there's something like that, where the soldiers fight not always in a phalanx and fight individually.
It's called the Crazy Horse sequence. It's basically the 3 cameras running at the same time, as close as possible to each other, and then ramped the speed, and we zoom in and out between the 3 cameras without cutting, because it actually physically is the same take.
So whether you're a director making a contemporary movie like The 300 or you're an ancient vase painter, you're going to use artistic methods to convey a reality.
For me, it's almost like somebody who was there the whole story and witnessed the battle, took some hallucinogenic drugs, went to sleep and then dreamed the whole thing again. Because a lot of it is very representational, a lot of it exists in the imagination.
You know, one of the key elements, obviously, to a graphic novel is the graphic style. The fact that Frank Miller has a particular way of illustrating, instantly you go, okay, well, that's his style. I looked at that and thought, well, why can't we actually have that kind of stylization during the movie? Why do our skies have to be, you know, photographic skies? Maybe we can make them a little bit painterly. Maybe we can actually, you know, push the film in this kind of weird world between live action, almost animated film.
Well, 300, the graphic novel, is the departing point for us in terms of the look of the film. We try to go for a higher contrast look that helps bring us towards that graphic novel look.
I think that our testing allowed us to actually push things even further. Ah, that looks too normal. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. Doesn't look like the graphic novel enough. Let's keep going.
One of the devices that we use to create that high contrast look is called crushing. And what this does is really interesting. The contrast lines, where the blacks feather into the mid-range, are very smooth and very much like Frank's draw colors in the mid-range and makes them blossom, so that it has a very painterly effect. It looks a little bit like some of the watercolor washes that Frank uses.
Working with Lynn Varley on 300, you know, I would give her my black and white drawings in ink, and then she would come in with her paints. And I guess the way I try to sum up our partnership in the crudest terms is that I do violence and she, because I do a scene where someone's being eviscerated, and she dries the blood just a little bit.
If Zach is, you know, composing shots to mimic Frank Miller's particular boarding style, I'm trying to colorize the shots to mimic Lynn's color styling. Looking at what she had done for the graphic novel, I thought it'd be interesting to actually kind of try and mimic that. One of the things I've been doing is using coffee stain skies, which is, you know, literally me getting, you know, balsamic vinegar or watercolor or whatever coffee stains and getting a nice texture on a piece of paper and then scanning that texture in, and then actually mixing those watercolor textures into a photographic sky.
Seeing the pages of the graphic novel come to life in a way that's just so unique, it's so exciting.
Delios, let's take a walk.
Yes, my lord.
What having the storyteller does is it gives you, in some ways, an excuse for the aesthetic of the movie. It's Delios' world. It's the world of mythology.
This film adaptation is consistent with a long line of interpretation, whether it's novelists in the 19th century or whether it's vase painters in the 4th or Herodotus in the 5th. Each person is trying to convey this wonderful event.
I'm ready for battle.
That you are, one of the finest, unlike any other Spartan. Tell them our story. Make every Greek know.
The point of view that we have is the one person who lived. And by going through his eyes, it enables us to make the story into a legend.
Remember us, he said to me.
And the fact that we still want to sit down and listen to their story today, 2,500 years after it happens, shows just how significant they were.
Long I pondered my king's cryptic talk of victory.
Delios goes back to Sparta and he tells of the bravery. And what that does is it rallies all of the Greek city-states so that later at the Battle of Plataea, you have the entire Greek army.
Now, here on this rugged patch of earth called Plataea, Xerxes' hordes face obliteration!